What if the most valuable thing you have isn't your business, your title, or your accomplishments, but your story? This episode's guest helps professionals and business owners find their personal story that makes people lean in. After 14 years in corporate, she walked away to build what became an 18-year practice in storytelling through workshops, legacy documentaries, and her book, My Life in Paragraphs. Find and tell your stories. She is a co-creator of Storycatcher for iPhone and founder at Tree of Life Legacies and YourStoryUnleashed.com. Glovisor welcomes April Bell.
Hey, Joe. Good to see you.
Hi, April. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
Me too.
All right. So, my first question that I have for you, you've built your life around helping others tell their life stories. But what's the story that shaped you?
I think the most interesting thing about that question is that part of what I have run into over the years in talking to people about their stories is this thing I call the reluctant storyteller. And I discovered along the way that I too am still and was a reluctant storyteller. And you mentioned the app Storycatcher. And for years after I started doing the storytelling and legacy videos, I'd run into people and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, you're the storyteller." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I'm the story catcher. You're the storyteller." And several years ago, I ended up putting myself in a storytelling workshop and the goal of that was I was very business oriented. I wanted to, one, nail my about story and also learn how to better help my customers and clients in telling their own stories. So I was very single-minded about it and it just like living underneath this professional umbrella. And I actually ended up taking that course twice because the first time I was so single-minded about how I just thought it needed to go that I didn't get anything out of it because I wouldn't give myself to the process. And so then when the opportunity came for me to take it again, I chose to go into that course. It's like a 2-month course with a cohort with an open mind and to have fun. And through that lens, I learned so much about the value of my own stories, and I was like, "Oh, my stories matter too." And all the things that I had been preaching to people about for years just landed more deeply, more profoundly, and I saw how telling my own stories impacted others in a new way, and that really shifted how I was showing up in my work. And it also provided me with a lot more joy in how that I did my work because so before that, I would tell my own stories in the workshops that I lead as examples. So again, I was just very like purposeful about it. Like I'm telling the story because it illustrates this prompt and module. And as the leader, that's my job to do that. Whereas I got the fun and play of exploring my own stories and the magic of when that meaningful nugget pops up that I may not even realize is important, but it makes an impact on another. So that really informed the way that I operated moving forward and helping people.
You've been a story catcher for much, much longer than that. Because one of the things that I found out about you, which I resonated with me, you spent a lot of time listening to elders tell their stories when you were a child. What did those moments teach you that still guide your work today?
Yeah, that was really interesting to look back on my life and connect those dots. So when I was a kid, my mom would call me the visitor. So I grew up in a neighborhood on this small private lane in the San Francisco Bay Area. And all the people that lived on that street when my parents bought that house, their kids had grown. So my brother and I were the only little kids living on that street. And so instead of playing with all the kids, I ended up making friends with all of the older people that were living around me. And I would go and just hang out with them and listen to their stories, and I could have them tell me their stories over and over again. Fundamentally, I believe that one of the, people ask all the time, like, what makes a person a good storyteller? And then the baseline is being a good listener.
Now, when you were a child listening to these stories, were you aware of what you were providing them the opportunity to share the story with you? And then were you self aware of what you were collecting, all of this information that one day would be extremely helpful?
No, I was a kid. But I mean, so then that's the interesting thing is that, another part of my story is, like this desire to work with purpose, to find my purpose and to work in my purpose. And part of looking back and seeing what just I naturally gravitate towards, which was, doing this whole like, mining the wisdom of elders. Like I'm just naturally wired to do that. And from taking the time to look back on those behaviors, then that helped me find that pathway that led me to tap into what my purpose is. So I just love people and I'm curious and I want to know more. And I'm just one of those people that I've always got a follow up question. Some people like it, others don't as much, but I just want to know more about you. And so then that's just my natural set.
Was there a defining moment when you realized that the storytelling aspect was more than just meaningful? It was your calling.
That occurred very purposefully. So in 2008, I had pushed, well, 2007, I'd pushed the reset button on my life. I was engaged to my business partner, and you can't end one without ending the other. So, and that business was his business. And so I found myself standing in this space of like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my, what am I going to do when I grow up? And to make a long story shorter, I studied psychology. So I've always been interested in people. I knew that I wasn't interested in doing therapy. And in the 90s, when coaching came on the scene, I was like, oh, this is for me because it's very forward thinking. And like, always was lit up about behavior modification and like, what makes you tick and why do you do what you do? And then what can you do to shift and change that? And all those things made coaching very attractive and felt that coaching was the thing. I just needed to find a niche. Okay. So fast forward to 2007, early 2008, and I'm standing in my living room and I'm like, I need a life coach a whole lot more than I need to be one right now. And I kid you not, 3 days later, I I had recently joined a community, a spiritual community. And there was this one woman that I had met in a class that we were taking, and I just really liked her. I go up to her and I'm like, hey, I'd like to have coffee sometime. Are you interested in that? So she's like, well, give me a piece of paper, give me your email, and I'll send you some information. And I'm like, I was thinking coffee, if you send me some information. But I was doing this practice at that time of like saying yes to everything. So instead of like clarifying, I'm like, okay. Finally, the message came in and I opened it up and sh my chin was on the desk because she was developing a program as a true purpose life coach, and she was helping people find their true professional calling in life, and she wanted to know if if I was interested in her program, and I was just like, "Oh my goodness." So I said yes again, and it took about 8 or 9 weeks, but I went in. I'm kind of a type A, so I had to, like, make myself be patient, be calm, but anyway, it was like 50% spiritual, 50% practical, and which was perfect for me because that really is also my design. And through that process, I discovered this passion that I have for connecting with people, to talking about them and their wisdom, to capturing their stories, going back to that being the visitor in my neighborhood as a child and hanging out with all the elders. And I came up with this idea and concept of doing, and that's a whole other story, of doing these video biographies as legacies for people to pass on, to capture now and pass on for future generations. And, one of the things that I say a lot is like, how many times have you gone to a celebration of life and learned something about somebody that you're like, oh, wow, I should have known that about them. We could have talked about it. So, I'm really interested in capturing those stories now while that person's still around so that you can ask those questions. And then also to have their wisdom, their guidance, their essence for, as we change and go through life and have our own milestones, we hear things differently. When I'm 20 and somebody's telling me about raising teenagers, I don't have a reference point for that. But then when it comes time that I have a teenager, like I'm going to hear all of that guidance much differently. And if I can tap into that and remember, what they had to share, it's just such a gift.
What's interesting is that you say that your wisdom lives inside your stories. What do you mean by that?
As I was doing the video biographies, the legacy videos with people, all that sort of grew and expanded. And I made the Story Catcher app. And then I also developed a bunch of which the basis of the app is we wanted to find a way to help people get started in telling their stories. And so like not everybody could afford to hire me, as doing a private documentary is no small affair. So I wanted to give people a way, an access point of how to do that for themselves or to get started, or even if they didn't want to hire me at all, that they could have something, or if they didn't have the resources too. I really wanted to kind of democratize that for folks. And so anyway, the kicker inside the app is that one, it's a super simple tool. So you don't have to know anything about video or editing. You can learn it in like a half an hour. And then the other thing is to give story prompts inside the app. And so then from that, I developed this card deck that was story prompts. And then from there, I developed a whole workshop to help people find their values-based stories. So when I first started doing the biographies, I discovered this thing called the ethical will. Do you know what that is?
No, please share.
So ethical wills are a centuries old Jewish tradition, and they're a way for people to pass on their values, their philosophies, and their lessons learned. And when I learned about this, I about lost my mind. And I was like, that's everything. So I'm super interested in people and their stories, but like, what does it mean to you? So that wisdom is how I talk about that for the most part is that, you know, the wisdom is the stories behind your values, and any value that you have, you're going to have developed that typically through a learning experience or a mentor. So then what we do is, I provide a prompt. We flesh out some values. What are some stories that you're reminded of? What values exist within that story? And then when did you initially, like, what was that moment? So, for instance, one person, a strong value that he has is listening, and he learned that from his grandfather. So his grandfather had a small store in their community, and he would go and work in the grandfather's store. And he noticed that his grandfather would always listen to his customers, and that helped make him a very beloved and successful business owner. And then he also noticed this about his grandfather in their daily life. Anyway, he took that lesson from his grandfather, and he has carried that through his whole professional life. He's a COO and does operations for folks, and he's grown businesses into the millions. And a lot of that is inside of this value of listening that taught him to listen to his customers. And that's been the secret sauce of his success going forward. And he got that from hanging out in his grandfather in the store.
Grandpa had
Yeah.
so much wisdom. Let's stick with this here for a second. So I download the app and it'll prompt me questions, and you just hit record and you just record yourself. How does that work?
There are prompts inside the app. So there's a thing called interview tips, and that just gives you ideas. And then I also wrote a book that's full of, so my book, My Life in Paragraphs, Find and Tell Your Stories. The first half is inspiration about why you should tell your story. The last third is my whole process and stepping through it. And then the middle are these story prompts that help you find and explore your values based stories. So once you kind of find and know your story, you then can film yourself or another. So it's more fun to do it with people than to like do this stuff yourself. You have a much richer experience doing story work with others. And so with the app is that you can take your 2 minute, 5 minute story, import it, add photos, screen text, and a title card, and then it renders it all together and sends it out and you can share it.
Okay, so you can share each story to family members.
Yeah. Friends, community. I mean, you can do like shout out videos. You could do testimonial videos with your clients, especially if you provide some kind of service that you make a thing. So then you can photograph the thing that you made and then them talking about it. But yeah, it's just a really simple tool to capture stories and share stories.
One thing, though, I do notice that most people do not think that their story or their life story and wisdom is really that important. Like, it's just, I had a normal, regular life. And I don't believe it's true. But why do you think people underestimate the value of their own story?
The way I often talk about this is like just the water we swim in. We're like, you do what you do because that's who you are. And that's, to us living our daily lives inside of our daily life, we don't realize how extraordinary certain things that we do might be. A lot of times that those extraordinary parts about us is just who we are. So we're too close. We don't see it. So then the gift of either, well, I guess this is the thing that set me on the trajectory to expand more in how I captured stories with people. So then over and over and over again in doing the interview with the elders, I saw that they were having this unique opportunity of viewing their life in a whole new way. And that, I think unfortunately we all spend a lot more time looking at what we did wrong as opposed to what we did right. Oh, I wish I'd have said that better. Oh, I wish I'd have, I should have done X instead of Y. And in reality, there's just as many, if not more, moments that we've shown up inside of our own greatness. But we're not trained to look at those things. And we don't always get the opportunity to look at them. So then in the telling of those the finding of those important moments and the telling of those important moments, we get to really get in touch with who we really are and what's truly important to us. So it's really growth and expansion in personal and professional realms. So then the thing that I see inside of people finding those values based stories, it gives them a foundation to stand on that's unshakable. This is who I am. This is why I do what I do. And then also, they get to find a way to elegantly communicate that. If I just tell you to be honest, that's not useful. But if I tell you a story about honesty or being honest or how honesty had impacted me in my life, that's going to be way more compelling and interesting. And you might take that away and use it. And then in a professional setting, if we take the time to figure out how to share those personal values based stories, it shows the people that we're working with who we are and what's important to us. And so then they connect with our humanity, with, our team, with our customers, with our community so that they can refer us better. And then we can kind of magnetize people towards us as opposed to trying to use that, buzzword or jargon to, try and capture their attention.
And I'm going to be honest right now. One of the things that I really want to hear is, have you recognized any patterns? Patterns in the stories that people like to tell, patterns in these golden nuggets that they want to pass on to the next generation, whether it's, great suggestions or some regrets. Anything like that's come up for you thus far?
Yeah. There's two things that hit me right away. One is hopefully not a surprise in that, at the end of the day, what really matters to people is love, connection, and relationships. And so over and over again, people talk about who they love and why, and that's been what's mattered to them. The other pattern is, yeah, that whole thing with the reluctant storyteller is that, I first coined that term from one of my favorite interviews. This woman, Elizabeth, her son had hired me to interview her. And this story is actually in my book. And when I got over to their house, I first met her and, she's just all warm and gracious and hi, how are you? Lovely woman. And then she turns to her son and in a lower voice, she's like, do we really need to be doing this? And I was like, oh. So I kind of scurry off to go set up my camera gear and whatever. And then her and her son are bantering back and forth about, she's like, I don't have anything to say. Who's going to watch this? I don't have any grandkids. I have grand dogs, and that doesn't look like it's going to change. I was like putting the microphone on her, and she's kind of taking it off. I mean, it was comical and also a bit uncomfortable. Anyway, we finally sit down, and I asked her one question. And 3 hours later, she was still sharing with me, and it was epic. She had so much to tell about her grandparent. They'd like immigrated from Greece, and her grandmother was this indentured servant, and they came to San Francisco. And she just, she was reading me poetry. It was amazing. And she's actually the reason why I coined and finally ended up using the term my life in paragraphs is that she ended up creating a practice after that experience in that, even though I did interview her for 3 hours, I mean, the woman was 70 years old. You can't get a whole life in 3 hours. And so then she, as stories would come to her, she'd just stop and write them down and then either keep them for herself or share them with her kids or her friends, or some of them she stored away for sharing them in the future. The one other thing that I really want to share about that, because I just talked about writing, is that my approach also is really geared towards people that aren't excited about writing. So if you can write a couple of bullet points, you're good to go. So I really focus on spoken word stories and helping people do that. If you're a writer, it's great, but I think there's a lot of tools out there for people that write. And so I'm really interested in helping people that for whatever reason, they don't like to write, but we all have a story to tell.
Absolutely. I've lived my life with the mindset that it is the things that we don't do that we regret most. Now, you get to see the other side of this. Is it true? Do people really believe this when you're much, much older? Is this one of those nuggets that they want to pass on?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that back. So yeah, that was part of that wisdom of a long life. You know, I had I was about 5 years in to listening to people's stories, and the biggest pattern and learning that I gained, which I was so grateful to have this realization, and I did it by, I mean, it's kinda obvious what I'm gonna say, but I didn't realize that was what was happening at the time, but, because of listening to so many people that had lived so much life, that I myself gained a lot of wisdom about life. And so one of the things that I learned is that, you never know the things that happen to you, whether it's a blessing or a disaster. So the most amazing thing might end up being a problem, and the most terrible thing might end up being the turning point to you finding your greatest gift. And then so for me in my personal life, I realized that when something would happen for good or for bad, and I guess I'll say especially for bad, if I didn't get what I wanted, I would just be curious, be like, oh, that's interesting. That didn't work out. I wonder what will work out. As opposed to when I was younger, I'd be mad. So one of the patterns that I saw in the people that were that were really able to be in the flow of life was this willingness to flow with life. And that, you never necessarily know where it's going to take you. And that, again, you take the good with the bad in stride because you never know what might unfold moving forward.
That's true.
As far as regrets, I mean, usually the regrets that people have is like over, not minding their relationships. So making money the most important thing, making work the most important thing. So the regret is like not taking as much time as they would have liked to for the people in their lives and the things that brought them joy.
What makes storytelling so powerful in leadership, business, and in the human connection?
Well, storytelling's as old as time. I mean, it's what we're made for. It's like as human beings, that's how we communicate. We all are naturally storytellers, and storytelling is also a skill, and it's something that you can practice, and it's just like any instrument. You can learn to tell stories well, just like you can learn to play the piano well. It just takes practice. Then the thing is that when we tell our true, heartfelt, authentic stories, that's how we show others who we really are, and that's what people connect to. When you're speaking from the heart, then you can say, "Oh, that's Joe. I see you. I feel you. Now I feel like I know you." And then when we do that for others, it gives them permission to do it for ourselves, to mirror that back. And then that creates trust, deeper connection, understanding, it's community and connection and all that stuff.
Going back to the reluctant storyteller that you had there for 3 hours. So, how does that work? When you're providing this service in person, you meet them, you listen to them for hours, then do you go back and edit these stories for the family members? And how is that delivered to the family member?
For the legacy video, that's a whole process of I do a pre-interview questionnaire. So there's a longer one for the storyteller and a shorter one for friends and family. So I let them weigh in on things that they want their person to tell because it may not occur for that person in the moment. Anyway, the longer questionnaire I have lets me get to know them so I know what aspects of life have been important to them. And then I take all that information together and I create a list of personalized questions. And then we schedule the interview day. I like to interview them in their natural habitat because that's where they're most comfortable. So I usually go to their house, or I'm also film people in other venues, but typically it's in their home. Then we sit down and I have my list of questions, and you're no stranger to this. It's the same as how you prepare for doing a podcast interview. Is you have your questions and then the conversation goes the way that it goes. But I do keep those objectives in mind so that, we don't go off on too many crazy tangents that aren't part of that goal of mining that wisdom in their heartfelt stories. And it typically I always guarantee 90 minutes because everybody's different. Some people are tight-lipped, you know, why did you do that? Because that's what we did. Okay, moving on. Other people, you ask a follow-up and, you get 20 minutes anyway. So I was guaranteed 90 minutes, but it's typically about 2.5 hours. And then from there, I take that media and I tighten it up and color correct it, make it beautiful. And then I create chapter markers across it. And then that's the main, like called the essential edit. And that's the main piece that they get for that legacy interview. And they always get that. So no matter what, I deliver that piece. And a lot of people choose to simply do that. And then they can upgrade from there to custom editing. So I have a mini documentary and a documentary. So 20-minute, a 45-minute, hour and 15 minutes, I really don't recommend. And that's for somebody who's had a really big life with a lot of things going on. And then, so then that's, custom editing, photos, graphics, music, all this stuff like you'd see on History Channel, Biography Channel. And so then I give them the edited piece but they also get that full long form interview so that they don't miss out on any of the stories that may not have made the cut into the shorter custom edited documentary.
What's one question that everyone should be asking themselves to uncover meaningful stories?
I would say that if you find yourself being curious about somebody else, ask yourself that question too, because there's probably something there. So if I say, well, hey, Joe, why is it that you decided to create a podcast and interview people?
So then the other way around would be that you're thinking about it. That's why you're asking me. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, so I would ask you that question
Yeah.
because for me, I'm so insatiably curious about others. Then mining that so then that's a value of mine, curiosity. So then I can look into that deeper and find, where did that start? And so then we're back to that 5-year-old kid sitting with the elders of her neighborhood saying, tell me that story again.
It's interesting. Let me answer your question though, even though I typically don't answer
Good.
questions on my podcast.
Yay. I'm excited.
And it's usually because I think I am a story catcher, just like you mentioned. Truly am. I mean, I have a million questions to ask you, and I know we can go on for hours, but I really truly want to learn about it. I want to hear a lot more of the stories and what was behind there, and what are your favorite things, and what did you hear, and the oldest person, and how does it change between someone who's 80 to someone who's 90? Is there a difference? I guess I want to get that granular in every conversation.
So we're peas in a pod on that one. The oldest was 105. He was the last living survivor of the San Francisco earthquake and fire. He had won and lost his fortune 3 times. Um, so the first time was he was 24 years old and he lost everything in the crash of 1929. And then, I don't know, he made his money back. It took him 10 years, did it again, lost it again, and then made a third comeback. And so then his nephew who hired me, he really wanted to know, like, what was the secret of him being able to, amass this kind of wealth 3 times over, because most people give up. And at the end of the interview, I realized, I'm like, because I asked him, so then he made all his money in hedge funds. And I'm like, "Richard, your uncle's a gambler." But then that was kind of the thing though, is that he had a high risk tolerance, and he was also, like, just very go with the flow. And so then that was kind of his wisdom to share was like, don't be attached to these things. And that was interesting about him too, is that, he would always say yes to stuff. And the one time he didn't say yes was that after that crash in '29, his family owned plot of land on the edge of North Beach, in San Francisco, and which became a parking lot. And over the years, and it's still there, so it's still giving the family money. And at one point, they wanted to sell it, and he's like, "That was the only time I said no." And that valuable piece of land is the thing that kind of has sustained him in the lean times. And so that wisdom with him was, don't be affected by any of the chaos going on in the outside world. Just, do your best to navigate your life in your way and in the best how.
Interesting. So, what stories are people more often afraid to tell, but they
Mhm.
should tell?
I talk about this one a lot. And oftentimes kind of the question that people ask is, in my opinion, what makes a good story? And I mean, actually, there's 2 things. One, you need to have some kind of change has to happen. Otherwise, maybe you're just telling an anecdote. And for me, the secret sauce is being vulnerable. And, vulnerability is challenging and it's scary. And if you're, being real about it, they are, all of us are nervous to do it. I'm nervous to do it. And also, so it's like, that thing that you think makes you look silly or foolish or, like you made a bad decision. That's the thing that people connect with. And it's edgy to tell those things because, I don't want to air my dirty laundry about when I made a mistake, but that's going to be the nugget in the story that really anchors and connects. So I talk a lot about being discerning with your vulnerability, accessing your vulnerability, choosing how to share what's compelling as opposed to cringeworthy. So yeah, vulnerability.
What do you hope people discover about themselves through your work?
I hope they discover their own wisdom. So the thing that lights me up when I do my workshop with people is to see the connections that happen as they share their stories. So the way that it's set up is that we'll work on a singular prompt and then we'll find the values and the moments that speak to that prompt. And a lot of the process is around one is kind of like looking into your heart and seeing what stories are there for you, what shows up, what's been meaningful. But then also I have people share with each other out loud because there's a different thing that happens when you just think about stuff inside your head is when you say it out loud. And so then I have people share what's coming up for them and then listen to what's coming up for the other person. So then a big part of storytelling is listening. And and I could talk about that for hours, but for this point is that what happens is that somebody might share a story that in a lot of ways has nothing to do with anything that you would do in your life, but there's still that nugget in there that you see yourself in their story. And it reminds you of other things that are important to you. And it's, kind of like this popcorn thing of where people just start bouncing off of each other of different stories, memories, values, and it just grows and expands from there. And then from that, what happens is really getting to know yourself deeply. So then you can, you really know what you're tethered to. So again, like I said earlier about, standing on that foundation of knowing who you are and what you stand for and what you value. So not only do you have that for yourself when you're in a situation where you may have to make a choice, if you know who you are and what your values are and there's a choice put in front of you that isn't in alignment with your values, it's going to be a whole lot easier to make that decision knowing what those are for you than if, you found yourself, so then what a lot of us do is flounder around and ask all our friends and like something feels off and we don't know why. So then we're, go around and talk to everybody about something's not right. Well, if you know what your values are, you can be like, that's not in alignment with my values. So no.
Inherent decision making.
Hmm.
So, if the world remember one message from April Bell, what would you want that message to be?
Your story matters. And that was the profound thing that happened to me and makes me just laugh at the absurdity of life is the moment that I discovered that my story also matters. Because running around being the story catcher, not wanting to be the storyteller, I realized that I had the same objection. And nobody wants to hear my story. And then I started telling my own stories and I saw the impact and value that that had on others. And I was like, maybe my story does matter too. So, yeah, everyone's story matters.
April, who should be contacting you today?
Well, um, so in the vein of the values-based storytelling, well, so then I run along two different lanes. So one is this a legacy. So if you have an elder in your life that you don't wait to start capturing those stories, you can use the app. You can use the voice memo on your phone. You can film them. Just do it. Start asking those questions. You want to know. But or you can work with me in a formalized way of to help you capture that legacy. And then on the other side is the workshop that I do. And so my partner Rumi Sukihashi, we have a course called Your Story Unleashed, and that helps people in business and professional settings to find those values based stories that they can use with their team, with their coworkers in presentations, like, super data-driven people, it's like, "Hey, bring some stories, personal stories to your presentation." And the course is designed to last over 90 days, and you spend 10 minutes a day or an hour a week, and at the end of that process, you'll have a nice bank of stories that you can access whenever you need them. And the way that it operates is there's, two options. One is a self-study and the other is inside of a cohort. Highly recommend, because you get that experience of bouncing stories off of other people and practicing that vulnerability in a safe space. Yeah, so that's yourstoryunleashed.com, and we provide the cohort version a couple times a year.
And how does that tie to the book?
It's the same process of tapping into your core values and finding those origin stories behind your values. So that's my whole process of what I take people through. So then correct, or you can also pick up my book, My Life in Paragraphs, Find and Tell Your Stories, and that whole process is provided on that last third of the book. So you can do it on your own. Get a friend though. Works so much better if you do it in a group.
Please tell us, where should they contact you?
You can find all of the story things that I do, because I also do, one-on-one consulting and a variety of different things, other versions of my workshop for different types of communities. And so that's at aprilbell.com, and then, or the Your Story Unleashed. But there's links to Your Story Unleashed in aprilbell.com. So yeah, all the news that's fit to print and my legacy stuff is there too, aprilbell.com.
April, thank you. You remind us that our stories are wisdom, connection, legacy. Thank you for helping people find those stories and to share them.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for being interested and giving me an opportunity to hopefully inspire some folks to look for their own stories and just share those with others.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Till the next time.